This meeting is a little bit different tonight. This is actually Wood is sponsoring this meeting. It's not a water board sponsored meeting, and that's simply because they did the engineering drawings on this. And they have not turned in the remedial design and implementation plan. We call it an RDIP, and with good reason, right? They have not turned that into the water board. So we had presented this to you before. We got some feedback that it was too large. It was a little imposing, and they've scaled it down some, so we'll be discussing that tonight. And then we'll be turning it into the water board later this year. So you have an opportunity tonight to ask questions about the new scaled down design. We have about a 20-minute presentation. You can ask questions anytime during it. I would just ask that you raise your hand, and I'll bring a microphone over because I would like everybody to hear your question. And then we'll save plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. We'll also stay after a few minutes if you'd like, if you have something individual you'd like to talk with us about. Any questions on all of that? No? Well, I would just like to say it's lovely to be here. I love coming to Newport, and thank you for having us. And I'm going to hand this over to Mike. Can you guys see this? Actually, sort of. Okay, you have handouts, and so please follow along with your handouts. Anybody not have a handout that we need to bring one to? Okay. And then just one last thing I remembered. We do have comment cards tonight, and I think it works best. If you have comments or questions, I'd like to collect them and read them so everybody hears what's going on. But we'll also take comments organically if you'd like to, too. We've got a small crowd tonight. I'm thinking maybe we'll talk really loud so the whole complex hears what's going on. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Tracy. So I just want to mention that this presentation is being recorded and will be placed on not only the Ford Newport Beach website, but will be uploaded to GeoTracker to the public. So if there's people here or people that are not here that you know of that want to view this presentation, it will be recorded. So again, my name is Mike Barnes with Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions. I've been on this project since about 2018. And what you're looking at here is a basic project timeline that kind of shows how the project started, where we are today, what we're here to discuss today, and where we see this project going specifically with relation to Bayridge Park in the next year or so. So 2018 to 2021, there was an extensive site investigations. That's where we were trying to characterize the extent of contamination in groundwater and soil gas. There's been a series of field investigations which included the installation of soil gas probes within the Bayridge Park community. There's been perimeter soil gas probes which are associated with the indoor air sampling. And of course, there's been extensive indoor air sampling for residents that have participated in that program that are in homes that are within the impacted area. From that extensive data collection, we performed a human health risk assessment specific to Bayridge Park. And from that human health risk assessment, which was submitted to the Water Board, we were requested to provide them with a feasibility study and a remedial action plan. So that's what we met last on in June, I think it was June 10th. And that was a Water Board hosted meeting where we discussed what was the draft feasibility study and remedial action plan. And we specifically have it as a draft document because we wanted to take into consideration not only the Water Board comments, but comments and considerations from the community. So we had a public comment period during that time, which we took into account the comments that we received, and then ultimately produced a final draft FS and RAP. Before I get to the final draft FS and RAP, I do want to mention that you're all aware we did the pilot test for this SVE system, which stands for soil vapor extraction. Excuse me. And that pilot test was to determine whether or not that remedial technology was appropriate and feasible for this particular community. So in the final FS and remedial action plan, we recommended a remedial alternative to the Water Board. And that remedial alternative was soil vapor extraction of soil gas beneath the surface, along with monitored natural attenuation of the groundwater contamination. And attenuation is just a fancy word for degradation. So as you want to monitor the degradation of those chemicals in groundwater over time, they will naturally degrade in this case. So, and then we also recommended subslab depressurization as a contingency measure for particular homes that may not have the VI pathway eliminated through the soil vapor extraction process. And we'll go into much more detail when Hui takes over the presentation. So I've mentioned the public comment period. So today, we're here to talk about the Remedial Design Implementation Plan, also called the RDIP. The way I like to think about it is the FS and the RAP is a conceptual idea of how the system will look. The RDIP is the nuts and the bolts. This is how it's going to look, this is how it's going to operate, and most importantly, how it's going to impact your community and how it's going to clean up the contamination beneath the ground. All right, so we're designing the system, and with that, I think I can turn it over to Wei to jump into the implementation of the remedy, which will be over the next year or so.
Hello, everybody. My name is Hui Li, and I'm the design engineer of the SVE treatment system. And I'm going to give you an update of the detailed design and also our planned implementation. As you could probably tell, English is not my first language. So if there's anything like sounds unclear to you, feel free to stop me and ask questions. I'm more than happy to clarify anything for you. As Mike mentioned, based on previous investigation and risk evaluation, it has concluded that some vapor intrusion has happening at some of the houses in your community. So in addition to temporary solution like distributing air purifiers, we are working on a long-term solution to remove VOCs from below ground and prevent vapor intrusion. And after evaluating different technologies, the Water Board has approved soil vapor extraction as the remedy. So back in June of this year, Water Board presented a conceptual SVE system layout to you. And we did receive multiple comments about negative impact to community and other concerns. And since then, we had to go back and worked on the detailed design and revised our design. And that's what I'm going to give you an update on today. And also, just like the revised system is simpler. I know whether like you guys noticed that on the posters there. So it's simpler and is less impactful to your community, but it still meets the remediation objectives and protect human health. So first, just like a little bit recap of what is the soil vapor extraction, like SVE. So vapor intrusion occurs when the VOC vapors on below ground migrate into your house, into the building. And you can think of the SVE like a giant vacuum system when we use a vacuum blower to extract, remove VOC vapor in the ground using the underground SVE wells, and the extracted vapor will be treated by a above ground treatment system and then discharged to the atmosphere under a permit issued by the Air Board. And by removing the VOCs in the ground below surface, we can prevent the vapor intrusion. And if you did attend the June 10th meeting, I believe it was like online, a Zoom meeting, this figure might look familiar to you. And that was the conceptual SVE system design. And we conducted a pilot test last year, October of last year, and we came up with the conceptual remedial design based on our pilot test results. And So by using the estimated ROI, radius of influence of 70 feet, we propose to have 28 pairs of SVE wells throughout the community. And we also plan to have 5 treatment systems in your whole HOA. And during the public commenting period, we received, as I mentioned before, comments from you guys about the footprint is too large, is too much negative impact to your community. And we did hear your concern, and we went back to revise our design accordingly and also meet the remediation objectives. And I will show you the revised design just in a minute. So I will just quickly, because I'm an engineer, quickly just talk a little bit about our design process. So after the remedial action plan is approved by the water board, we looked at the pilot test results. We picked the suitable flow rate and vacuum. And we also calculate the sizes of the equipment and the piping. In addition, we also run a numerical model to simulate the performance of the SVE system, to evaluate the vapor velocity, and to help us for the detailed design. And now I'll let our SVE expert, Chuck Blanchard, to talk a little bit about the modeling process.
Yeah, hi, I'm Chuck Blanchard. And our original analysis of the data just consists of plotting vacuums versus distance from our extraction point. So Quay talked about how we have extraction wells at this site. When we ran the pilot test, we measured the vacuums, and they tend to decline with distance, and we plot them out. And that's a basic analysis that we did. So the 70-foot ROI that you saw previously was based on that type of analysis. The thing is that vacuum doesn't actually clean anything up. It's actually the flow of air through the ground which causes the remediation to occur. So the next step that we did to kind of do a higher level of analysis was the mathematical model. So the way the mathematical model works is that a modeler will put in the depth to water at your site, the type of wells that we're installing, and they'll start to populate that with the data from the pilot test. And then that gets compared to the pilot test. And when all that data agrees with what we generated in the pilot test, the model is considered to be, quote, calibrated. And once the model's calibrated, you can use it to do various types of more detailed analysis of the site. So what you're seeing here is some model output. And I'm not a modeler. I'm not going to go into massive detail on how a model works. But what we generated was a field that shows what the vapor velocities look like in the ground, what the flow of the actual vapor looks like to the well. And after doing that type of analysis, we were able to revise the radius of influence to 100 feet instead of the 70 feet that we came up with on our preliminary analysis. Also, one of the things that we did, if you look at that SVE well right there, you can see that it's screened from basically the top to the bottom. It's a single well spanning the entire zone. That is actually the industry standard way of doing things. Using 2 wells, the well pairs that we were doing before, it was good for pilot testing, but that's actually not the way that the industry would tend to handle impacts going down 50 feet into the ground. It would only be a single well. So we just moved from our testing setup to an industry standard way of doing things, and which is predicted by the model to give sufficient remediation in a reasonable time frame. And I'll turn it back to Quay, and if anybody has questions on the modeling or this type of analysis, we can get into it further at the end of the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. So here it is. On the left is the original design you guys probably seen before, and on the right is the revised design based on our modeling results and pilot testing results. And as Chuck mentioned, excuse me, For a single SVE well, the ROI can be at 100 feet. And so that means instead of 28 pairs of SVE wells, that's 56 wells, we only need 13 SVE wells to cover the same area. And we also decreased the number of the SVE wells from 5 to 1. And by working with the HOA, we were able to identify a location of the SVE system. Oh, okay. Sorry. So decreased number of the SVE treatment systems from 5 to 1. Right. And we were able to identify the location of the treatment system. I think it's probably maybe easier to see on the next slide. It's outside your community walls and next to the country club drive. So probably have a pointer actually.
Yeah, if I can just jump in real quick. So before you saw the yellow squares, and we were calling those SVE skids, each one of those yellow squares on the previous slide represented an actual system, its own system. So we were showing 5 individual systems to the network of wells. Now we're showing one individual system, and that individual system is going to be set on the outside of the HOA. And I think one of the biggest things we got as far as feedback with the systems is that they were going to take up parking spots. And between those 5 systems, we were looking at taking, 10 to 15 parking spots, which was unacceptable. But that's no longer the case. With the system that we have here, we're taking up 0 parking spaces.
Thanks, Mike. So also, you can see the layout more clear without the ROI circles on this figure. And so we have total 13 SVE wells. Maybe I'll just go over there, if you guys don't mind. I'm sorry. That didn't work because it's still kind of light outside. And this well is the one we already installed during the pilot test. So basically, we're only going to have 12 new SVE wells. And smaller, fewer wells also means lower flow rates and also decrease the footprint of the treatment system. And also, you can see those dark lines are underground trenches by piping for the SVE system. And so there's a lot less underground trenching as well. So after the revised design is approved by the water board, we will start implement the remedy. And I'm going to walk you through the different steps of the implementation, and so you know what to expect. The first thing we're going to do is to run a SSD pilot test at one building of your community. And the SSD, subslab depressurization, is a contingency remedy in case the SVE system doesn't prevent the vapor intrusion effectively in some areas. And the reason we are doing that, the first step is because it has smaller impact to the community. Is only one building, and the whole test only going to last less than a week. And so just a little bit like SSD system is you install vapor collection piping underneath the building foundation, and then just pipe it to the rooftop. And there's a blower on the piping will extract the vapor from below the foundation and discharge to the roof line to interrupt the vapor intrusion. And also the reason we're doing this first is we will have the data ready just in the future in case we do need to design and install the SSD.
Yeah, where will that be located? So that's going to be something that we're going to work out within the community. We're actually looking for a volunteer community member that would want to have that put on their house.
Yeah.
Yeah, this would just be on for a week. Very minimal. You wouldn't notice it.
You're talking about the SSD. I think we don't need to even operate for 24 hours, right?
I could probably clarify this. So, I can answer the question, but can I repeat the question? I think it would be best to hand him a microphone. If you could repeat that approximately, that would be wonderful.
Okay, so you mentioned that the SSD that you have on the screen there is there. The words were in case the other system doesn't work. The other system is the system presented with all of the technology and science behind it. So again, questioning the need for the backup plan is kind of not really making me feel secure. But more importantly, this device here, this will run all of the time or only when it has to based on detection or as a bypass system? How often does it operate?
Sure.
Because obviously it's extremely intrusive and gross and looks like something that you don't want next to a bedroom window like you got in the picture there.
I wouldn't dispute that point. So to start with, what does it mean if the SVE system doesn't work? So we fully expect the SVE system to clean up the soil under the site. I mean, we expect it to do. But can the SVE system physically generate a small vacuum under each and every home here such that each and every home completely interrupts the vapor intrusion pathway immediately? That's hard for us to say. And the reason for that is that we did a pilot test in one area of the site, and then we used a mathematical model to extrapolate how that's going to work at the end. Right? But is the vacuum at each area going to be exactly what the model said it's going to be? The answer is, of course, no. And we won't know that answer until we run it. But are we physically cleaning the entire site? Yes. We will have airflow through everything. So that is going to be occurring. So that's the second part of your question.
I guess the second question then is option A, which we didn't like because there were so many of these sites,
Right.
which have now been condensed because the science has been looked at differently maybe. Which of those systems actually works the best? If we were to put in A versus B, which one
Sure.
would do a better job of mitigating and getting these vapors out of the ground?
It depends on what you're trying to do. So the SVE system is going to provide remediation of the site by actually removing the source beneath the entire site. Okay,
understand
these
they both do
systems,
the same
they actually don't.
Better.
They don't, and that's where I was going with it. Is that what this system does? Is it physically extracts vapors only from underneath a single house. It does not clean anything up. It simply prevents the vapors from going into the house. So as such, if you ask how often does it run, it runs 24/7. The power that these things pull, which would be paid by Ford, is about the same as a couple of light bulbs. So these blowers are extremely low power, almost no sound to them. That is probably something of an obtrusive installation, which could be, probably installed much better than that or differently. But hopefully that's kind of answering the question. It's a 24/7.
So,
I think
right.
So they're not doing the same thing. One, the SVE system physically cleans the site, right? This doesn't clean the site. This protects human health if necessary, within a single building, but doesn't actually clean anything up. So you can imagine these things might run for the next 50 years, whereas the SVE system can clean the site in a year and a half. But this will provide immediate remediation of the vapors going into a single home in the event that the SVE system wasn't able to do that.
And then just to provide some additional clarification, so when the Water Board was looking at the draft feasibility study remedial action plan, one of the components in there was the continued operation of those air purifiers. And we've heard from a lot of community members how those air purifiers are noisy, they're intrusive, a lot of folks who have received them, returned them because of the noise. And we know that the SVE system will do the cleanup part, but that shallow area right beneath the foundation may not be targeted and quickly and effectively, and that is where the Water Board's asking for a kind of contingency plan for the protection of human health and that vapor intrusion. So they're two completely separate things, and ideally we want to see SVE create that negative pressure and stop the vapor intrusion from occurring. But if it doesn't, we do want to see Ford move forward with stopping it from happening. So that way, the homes that weren't tested are being protected, because we don't have data for every single home, and so we can assume homes that haven't been tested, but there is vapor intrusion occurring at other ones, that they're also having it occur. So we just want to be proactive with that as well. Right. No. Yeah. And that's. And that's a great question. And when it comes to what they did to reduce that number with modeling, something the Water Board wants to see with any site, anytime any modeling comes into play, there's built-in assumptions. So we do want to see that it's working as modeled and as effective as they're saying it's going to be. So we want the supporting data, because if it isn't, we want them to, we would request them to increase the SVE system, number of wells, things like that. And so because of the modeling, it should not affect the effectiveness, but I know that I'll let them touch on how reducing the number does at least lengthen it out slightly.
I think the key here is that we're just adding a tool to the toolkit that we may not pull out. But if we have to pull it out, that tool is going to be sitting there, and we'll be able to implement it as needed. Can you show a slide that shows the SVE wells? Can we go back a couple, just the network? So that's a 13 well system, right? There's nothing that says that could not later become a 20 well system. If there was some area that, say, I don't know, the soil was tighter than the rest of the site, so the model didn't catch it the same way, there's no reason why we couldn't add some additional SVE wells along there. That's the system is going in with a large single pipe, and it's going to be oversized such that if you wanted to add some additional wells in some place to get extra coverage, it's fairly easy to cut them in. The other way to put these systems in is they run an individual pipe to each well. Those pipes tend to be smaller, and they're sized for the well. It makes it harder to tie individual extra wells in. That's another tool that we have in the toolkit to address, maybe the system isn't providing enough remediation in one area. We would prefer to just keep running with that SVE system and maybe add some SVE wells as opposed to going to subslab depressurization. So that's the tool that we would like to implement if needed.
And another component for why there's the preference to do soil vapor extraction versus the subslab depressurization is because it cleans up the subsurface. It gets the site to closure, which is what we want. If they were to just do subslab depressurization, there's other sites that with these concentrations, they would just go straight to mitigation. The problem with that is the case stays open, and the monitoring of the systems goes on for a very long time, and then there isn't necessary, because it doesn't remove that source. It just slowly gives it a way out. So instead of it going into the home, it goes to above the roof line. So this just gets an end point sooner as well.
Okay. I think just finish up about the SSD system. We are going to evaluate the SSD, the need for the SSD through the SVE system operation, and we are going to assess each building individually and see whether it's needed or not. But the reason what I was trying to say is just like we are running the pilot test first, so we will have the parameter data, design data if we need it installed. So after the SSD pilot test, we are start install the SVE treatment system. And the first step is we are install 5 groundwater monitor wells to monitor the decline of the VOC concentrations in groundwater. And as you can see, probably those yellow dots, and there are 4 wells inside your community. Another one is outside your community on the Bison Avenue. And on the left is the typical drilling rig. You guys probably seen it before. And the other figure is the finished monitoring well box. And after installation of the groundwater monitoring well, we're going to install 12 new SVE wells. And on the right side, the picture is those SVE well installed during the pilot test. And we're going to reuse one of them. And on the left, the figure is the typical wellhead of well vault of the SVE wells. And we have like piping valve and vacuum and flow rate monitoring device. So as I mentioned, we are still finalizing our design, including the well boxes. So after install the SVE wells, we're going to put in the piping connecting the SVE wells. And those 2 figures are just like typical trenching, piping, and backfill figures for installation. And after backfill the trenches, we are going to restore your surface, repair your surface, either by repaving with 2-inch asphalt of the entire road, or if the trenches happens to go through the landscape area, we are going to resurface it to match existing landscape.
I just wanted to add one benefit to the revised layout is that we have very limited and minimal impact to the landscaped areas. That was one of the things with the original design. We had to go in between houses for long runs. So most of this work will be done within the roadways, sidewalks, things like that.
Just kind of a basic question on when you do this work, installing the piping, will we have access to our garages, the roads? If not, how long not?
Yes, you'll have access. Yeah, there may be diversions and partial lane closures, but the process should be pretty quick. And then at the end of the day, if anything's left open, they'll put steel plates over it so you can drive over it. So yeah, there may be a point where we're going in front of your driveway where we may have to limit access or restrict access, but we'll communicate that with each of the property owners. Yeah.
I think the other thing is we'll be sending out a work notice beforehand, and we're perfectly happy to have some type of virtual meeting if you want to hear the nuts and bolts. So you'll be notified well in advance, and then we'll work with your schedules to make sure that it's not too impactful. I think we're getting close to the end, so thanks for hanging in there.
So after...
Oh, wait, we have one little question here. Hang on one moment.
So, can I ask questions that aren't to do with this specific model that's up there?
Hope you don't mind, and we'll get through this.
Let me just say, wait, you speak perfect English.
Thank you. Okay, so after we install the piping connecting the wells and then to the treatment system, then we are going to place a custom structured treatment system building next to the Country Club Drive. And this is a rendering figure of that treatment system building. And we're enclose all the equipment inside the building and soundproof it. So if you stand like about 3 feet away from it, it should sound like a fridge. Refrigerator.
I think the question was, will you make it match our architecture? Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Yes. And we'll use that new gray paint.
This is
Yeah, this is just a rendering. What we tried to accomplish with this is just show the size and the general colors, so we match the siding and the colors. But yeah, something that matches the shingled roof approach. Yeah, that's something that we
very,
can do.
very good comment, actually. Good point.
Will it block the windows?
No.
It's blocking the windows.
She said
Well,
it's blocking
right,
the
so-
windows in the picture.
Right now, the roof line in this particular unit is about 20 feet from ground surface. And so that rendering right now is 11 feet from the
11 feet,
ground.
yeah.
So it's just because it's from a lower angle, you're looking up.
So it's not going to block the window.
And this, just to clarify, Leslie, this is on the other side of yours. Okay. Yep.
Now versus the other ones. And if people maybe in garages, it would be a little more fair.
Yeah, we evaluated a lot of alternatives, and fortunately and unfortunately, this is what we came up with. I couldn't quite hear you, Leslie.
What would Ford do for the two of us that are impacted so heavily versus everybody else?
I'd be happy to bring that to their attention. I
Okay.
will bring that up, or ask them of that. No. You have to be able to access the equipment. You have to be able to install the equipment. You have to change out carbon. It's not something that goes below ground in this particular community or this area.
So this is just another rendering figure of plan view of the treatment system building without the roof, so you can see all the equipment is included inside the building. So after the installation of the treatment system, we're going into operation, maintenance, and monitoring, which is O&M phase. And so for the first week or so, we will start the system up and fine tuning it, and just to make sure it is operating as designed. And after that, we plan to let the system operate continuously for a year. And we will come monthly to collecting samples to evaluate the performance of the system and to show compliance to the permit issued by the Air Board. We'll also come to perform required maintenance as well. In the meantime, we will continue monitoring the groundwater, soil vapor, and indoor air. And after 1 year, we'll turn the system down and collecting additional samples for SVE system evaluation. So this is a preliminary remediation schedule, and we, as Mike mentioned, we are going to submit the RDIP to the water board by end of this year, and we're hoping to get approved early next year. And then we're going to spend like a week or so to do the SSD pilot test. And after that, we're going to start installation of the SVE system. So we plan to start construction in March, and we will send out the notice of work in advance, and we will evaluate whether it's necessary to have another community meeting before that as well. And also during construction, all the vehicles on site will be required just for required for construction only, and all the personal vehicles will be parked off site. And then after that, we're going to
Wait. When you said personal vehicles, whose personal vehicles are you talking to? Talking
the
about
workers.
the workers' vehicles
Yeah,
will be
sorry,
parked
okay.
off site. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. So we're not going to park in, not going to impact the parking here. Thank you for clarification. And after that, we're going to start plan to run the treatment system for a year, and then we're going to perform evaluation afterwards, and then we're going to collecting additional samples, and we'll work with water board and with the community, and to decide what the next step is. I think that's all from me, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Real quick, I
Okay.
just want to add to Wei's comments. As far as the construction activities, which are shown on that schedule to be from April through March, that's the heavy equipment. That's the actual construction. That's the period of disturbance, as I'd like to think of it. After that, and the system is running, our presence will be back to what you're used to right now, minus the drill rigs. There won't be construction activities. There'll be more foot traffic. We'll be doing the indoor air sampling, the sampling of the probes that are in the roads, and the monitoring of the system. So that construction activity is that limited period of time.
Okay, I think we're done, right? Yeah, good job. We're going to open this up to questions and answers. And yes, I do see you. Who has questions? And I'm just going to number you off. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And did anybody fill out any cards? No? Okay. Well, that idea didn't work.
So this problem is not just limited to Bayridge, which seems pretty extensive in Bayridge. What are you doing similar to this, or what are you doing in other communities where they are also impacted with this? Is this the worst or the most invasive, or what are other communities doing to help them, and how do we feel?
Right. That's a great question. So we are seeing most of the vapor intrusion here, but we are seeing it also over at Belcourt Terrace, right across the street. So they also are having a similar soil vapor extraction system designed. They're just one step behind Bayridge because here we do have more homes that have vapor intrusion occurring, so we are prioritizing remediation here first to address that. But then they will also have the extraction wells going in and an SV system similar to here. It's a little bit it's a little smaller. It is a little smaller, but it's going to be very similar. Mm-hmm. Right. So when it comes to the soil vapor data right over there, it as we head kind of more south in that direction, concentrations decrease quickly, and we are not seeing as much vapor intrusion over there. I think there's just, I know. And we have a lot of indoor air data, and they've recently also had their risk assessment done, and we are just not seeing the vapor intrusion over there like we are here. And so over there, it does not look like there's going to be the need for soil vapor extraction. The soil gas concentrations are just not high enough to warrant it. There, it's more likely that they're going to have sub-slab depressurization systems installed instead. And those are more long-term. But that's more likely what's going to happen for the homes that we are seeing vapor intrusion. There's also that draft feasibility study and remedial action plan is on my to-do list at the moment. And so I still need to look at all of the data and really see what, as the water board, what we want to see Ford do as well.
First off, I appreciate all the effort that's been made, the science, the people involved, etc. I understand it's a big problem and everybody's going the right direction dealing with it. I think that it's important to understand that, and again, you've made great steps to address our concerns, okay? But the reality is, this is an inconvenience. It's not a minor inconvenience, it's a major inconvenience. And we're only in the baby stages. And when we talk about construction and heavy equipment, et cetera, it is going to tear up our community. It is going to make it difficult for us to live our lives. Simple things like saw cutting asphalt to put in your pipes is about a 90 decibel machine that's going to run for hours and hours. That's like standing under John Wayne Airport when a plane lands about 100 feet above your head. I mean, it is an inconvenience. So my question is, has anything been made and offered, or has it been requested to mitigate? Two people who have a question because they live close to the building. What can you do for me? I'm asking, what can you do for everybody? Because parking will be a nightmare. You can have the employee park somewhere else, but you still have vehicles here. I mean, I hope people understand what a mess it's going to be, okay? You kind of sugarcoated and said, when we're all done, it'll just be back to as it is now, which isn't that big a deal. Well, you can say it's not that big a deal, but honestly, when you come to monitor a well, okay, you bring a large truck, it parks in a red zone, it parks in front of a fire hydrant, okay, you have equipment in the street, and you have 4 technicians or professionals standing around watching this process. That's just to come monitor the test out of a well. That alone is an inconvenience. And again, you think parking's not a problem. Why are you parking in the red? Why do you park in front of a fire hydrant? I know I'm making a big thing out of a little thing, but this is the little thing. And the big stuff is really going to hammer us. So I'm wondering, what is on the table for us? What does happen when you're done with this place? Because it's going to destroy us for months.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to minimize the impact. I was just trying to compare it to the heavier construction activities and what we're currently doing. Yeah, no, I can appreciate it, yeah. And I'd be happy to take back your concerns to Ford as far as not just what can you do for me, but what can you do for all. So I will have that conversation with Ford.
I will add, there is going to be that inconvenience during the construction and everything. There is going to be the benefit of getting this cleanup completed and eventually site closure so that it will be a thing of the past. That is the ultimate goal and what we really do want to see, and why the water board for here was we really were pushing more soil vapor extraction versus sub-slab depressurization because we want to see the site get to closure. I would like to, not retire in 20 plus years and the site still be open. I want to see it closed, and that gets your guys' life back to normal and stuff. And then standards may change and there'll be some new contaminant, but no, we're hoping that's not the case. But we do want to see the closure, and I'll make sure, and follow up on the compensation, and that they're at least asking the question. But when it comes to that, I know that's out of the water board's hands as far as how much we can push on those requests. Yeah. Yeah, and the yeah, and that's why a lot of times we've had those conversations with buyers and sellers and the realtors and stuff. And one of the benefits of the site getting closure is that then it's done, and there's that kind of clean bill of health, if you would. And then you would have to we'd have to double check with an actual real estate attorney if then there is the necessity to still disclose. I don't know about that as the geologist that I am, but that's something I think we can find out. As the site does get to closure, do you have to disclose after the fact? That one I don't know, but we can definitely find that out.
So I'm sure I'm going to be ignorant here because I've been in Europe, like for most of a year and a half. So I haven't been to the meetings and things because I haven't been here, but I do have the paperwork and I've read, as much as I can. But so I live on this back row of Hartford. I have a little unit that's
This one's working okay. Slope of grass.
I know this was a trick to shut me up, but that's okay. So I lived here, so my place has the grass and then the wall. And because I'm on my own for some reason, I have a cul-de-sac of one Ford Road, rather than a house that's right there. So I can see from my dining room, I can see into all of one Ford Road. So I lived here when the plant was here. I lived here when they knocked down the plant and just left it all for quite a while. And then they built One Ford Road, which is multi-million-dollar houses with lots of children and lots of people. And so I'm sure I know they did major, obviously, environmental studies. So one of my questions, my first question is this new environmental, what was the instigation for all of this? Because is it state laws, new environmental state laws? Was it a county thing, a city thing, or did you just go from HOA and ask them, can we do it in yours? And some said no, and some said yes, because I'm telling you, I see right into One Ford Road. I've never seen one environmental truck in there, not one. So, and honestly, I find it after seeing the Ford Aeronautics plant when it was here, having it not be here, I find it truly hard to believe that where the site actually is could be have less issues than we do here, that we have so much more than they do. I find that, and it was there for years.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that kind of hard to believe. Plus there is the fact that even though I'm retired and too lazy to work, I am a real estate broker, and you will have to disclose all of this every time you sell your house. You will have to disclose every bit of this. So I'm just wondering, who made the decision to initiate this? Was it the state? Was it the county? Or was it just each individual homeowners association?
So what got this investigation started was the case has been open since the 90s. When the facility was getting closed, they started assessment. It was with the county at the time. When the facility closed and they got their soil closure, which allowed them to rezone One Ford Road community into the residential community it is now and do the redevelopment, the case then transferred to the water board, and it was to deal with the off-site groundwater contamination, the contaminant plume that's gone to the south and to the north. groundwater, so it flows towards the north up to Bonita Creek, and it also leaves the One Ford Road community to the south and flows down kind of by that golf course. So there's several communities that it passes through, and so there had been the groundwater monitoring. As part of that, industry standards change and evolve over time, and something that we do is look and prepare a conceptual site model. We ask responsible parties, and the consultants would, on behalf of Ford, prepare this document that looks at all of the site history. So everything that Ford did within the former facility as far as remediation and cleanup, all of the various assessment that they've done. And one of the things that we looked at was some old soil gas data that they had done in 2006 and 2008. We looked at those results and compared it to what we know now as an industry and said, okay, this needs to be rechecked. So we asked them to go out and do some additional sampling. And it started with 14 soil gas probes, and it has now expanded to, there's I think 160 just for monitoring the plume, and it's all over. The soil gas plume is partially from the impacted groundwater, and it has to do with the soil type as well. So it's always been an open case, but we like to look at things, especially the open cases. We check it and make sure it's still being protective of human health.
So this is nothing from the state or the county?
It is from the state, because I work for the Santa Ana Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is a state agency under the umbrella of California EPA.
But, so the water board just decided this then?
It's not so much just decided. It's a general practice that we do with all the cases we manage. We're always looking at them and making sure they're adequately assessed, and all of whether it's soil, gas, and groundwater, that it has been adequately characterized, meaning have enough samples been collected, and is it protective of human health and the environment. And if we see something that was assessed 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and we re-look at it, and there's questions of does it still remain protective? And if that answer is no, then we want to do some additional assessment, and that's what it is. But we do this on all of our cases.
But not in a big area here, just in a limited area.
No, so I want to bring up a point of clarification that might help. So I appreciate your point of looking into Ford Road and saying, how could everything occur there, but we have most of the issues here? So there's two things. Extensive remediation of soil and groundwater occurred within the former boundary of the facility. So that's one reason why you see lower concentrations of soil gas in that particular area.
Can I just say
Sure.
real quick that my place ends here, One Ford Road starts here,
Correct.
like this close.
Correct. So I have a follow-up point of clarification. Just because you have concentrations of vapors beneath the surface doesn't mean you're going to have vapor intrusion inside a home. Each home acts individually. So we see vapor intrusion within Bayridge Park for a couple different reasons. One, because of the higher soil gas concentrations, which we see in this particular area because it's on the edge of where that remediation occurred. The plume does extend within One Ford Road, and there are higher concentrations just on the other side of the wall. It's more kind of like if you were to think of the guard shack, right? Like as you enter Country Club Drive, that's kind of where the higher soil gas concentrations. So there are higher soil gas concentrations that occur within One Ford Road. But what Jessica was saying is we don't see the indication of vapor intrusion occurring in as many homes. And that can be for a number of reasons. It could be due to the construction of their homes, right? They were built after the construction of these homes. They could have some sort of moisture barrier that's acting as a vapor mitigation barrier, right? And not allowing those vapors to enter the house. They could have a thicker foundation. Things like that you need to take into consideration. So there's two things. And so as that groundwater, right, was remediated on the former site, some of that contaminated groundwater still follows two pathways, as Jessica indicated, one up towards the Bonita Creek area, and the other is kind of down the hill and into the Big Canyon Country Club area there. And the groundwater is the source of the soil gas contamination. So where the groundwater moves is where you're going to see that soil gas, basically off gas of the groundwater, and then make its way up. So if you were to think of One Ford Road as the area where extensive soil and groundwater remediation was done, you would tend to see that you're going to have less soil gas impact there. There is still soil gas concentrations there, but it decreases quickly. And I also want to address the number of homes we've sampled or have offered sampling to over 100 homes within One Ford Road. So we're there. You just don't see us as much. And on this particular side of the wall, we just don't have that many homes that we offer indoor air sampling, but we have a number of groundwater monitoring wells. We have a number of soil gas probes. I mean, there's soil gas probes all over the place there, and we sample indoor air there constantly. So they are impacted. They're just the impacts are being seen differently than here versus there.
And another component is they also, part of the remediation that they did do was soil vapor extraction. It was very effective over there even back in the 90s. And a lot of times what we see with old facilities that were remediated, there's just lessons learned within the engineering field of cleanup. And even over there, given that they did a lot of the cleanup back in the mid-90s, it was effective at removing the soil gas and reduced those concentrations significantly. So
Well, thanks.
positive
I mean,
in
both
that
of
as
you,
well
that's
here.
really good information from both of you. Thank you.
Good, and I just also want to add that this is an aggressive approach, soil vapor extraction for these types of concentrations. But you know, I just want to reiterate that our goal and objective of the SBE is to hopefully break that pathway and to eliminate that pathway. But of course, we have to have multiple tools in our toolbox, as Chuck mentioned. And the SSD, it is unbecoming. It's not something that I would want on the side of my house. But again, as you mentioned, you know, can you put the shingles that match? You know, we're willing to work with the community to make it look as best we can. I get it. I wouldn't want any of this happening in my neighborhood. I completely empathize with you. I don't live here. I get it. I understand the inconvenience, and I will make sure to take that back to Ford, and Jessica checks on me because every time these come up and we have meetings with Ford, she makes sure to reiterate it so that it's been brought to their attention. So I appreciate it, appreciate all the comments, and thank you for commending us on our work. I'd like to thank the community. You guys have all been fairly easy to work with, and I appreciate it.
Okay, we have a question here, a question here. I'm going to do a time check. It's about 15 till we're supposed to end at 7. We're willing to stay after if you folks want, but I will see where we are at 7 o'clock, okay? Pardon me? And exactly, we'll stay after and be at the poster, so.
Thank you. This is probably the best history lesson I think that I've heard in 3 years of understanding how this whole thing came to be going back into the 1990s. I've done several hundred houses with methane mitigation and dairy, so I kind of get what finally happened here. My question really goes back, and a little bit has been answered already, but from the standpoint of the person from the Water Quality Board, can you be more specific about the term closed? And to the extent that will there become a finite point in the future where we can say, yes, there was remediation done, and yes, it is closed, and that's the end of it? Because I think the lady's comment about real estate, and this will have to be disclosed, which is fine. I mean, it's part of the world we live in. We understand that. But the idea of closed from this standpoint of the Water Quality Board's position, does closed mean closed, or does that mean closed until we think of another reason to come back and look at it?
So that's a great question, because there were sites that were closed and given what we call as an NFA. It's a no further action. And when those occurred back in the 90s, early 2000s, 80s, there have been cases that have been reopened because of just industry standards changing, and we learned more. On this project, when this site gets closure and we issue that NFA, the goal is we don't want to reopen cases. So we make sure everything has been looked at and it's a done closure. When it comes to the remediation being done, that's going to be different. So we'll hit a point where we're going to say, you know what, no more remediation is necessary. but we're going to do some longer term monitoring because, again, when we issue that NFA, I don't want to come back and I have to come back and say, you know what, we missed something. We want to NFA final, and we're done. Of course, if new information comes along and there's a risk to human environment, then it would get reopened and Ford would remain the responsible party. That is something that all of our do state, that we always have the right to reopen the case if we get new information. But typically, it's a good closure and we're done.
Okay. All right.
Related to this, the small building that you are going to put on the back road, assuming things are wonderful in 2 years or 2.5 years, is that building going to stay there or will be taken away?
Yeah, the need for the long-term availability of that building will be determined during that first year of evaluation in the system. And it could be removed in the interim, yeah. And I just want to mention, as much of that construction of the building we're going to try to do off-site as we can to minimize impact.
So I think I just wanted to emphasize that we'll make sure that we communicate with you what we're doing and when we're doing it. And we have several resources you can go to get more information. I'm happy to send that out to the HOA and issue it to you. Again, we're all available for you to call. But I've heard loud and clear that you folks want to need to know what's going on as we move forward. So we'll make sure that we figure out what works for you and that we do that.
Yeah, we can, have them send out like a survey if you guys want to just figure out the best way to communicate the construction schedule. We want to make sure, at least on the water board side, we don't want any surprises on coming from you guys. We want you to be well informed of stuff. And so if it makes sense to do an open house style, we're going to be here from this time to this time to answer any pre-construction questions, we can do that. If you want another formal presentation, we can have Wood put that together. Whatever it takes to just make sure that those concerns are addressed.
And we'll do virtual too. We're
and
very
we can
good
do
at that now.
virtual as well. Yeah.
Pros.
And I'll be your point of contact for any concerns you may have, and Jessica will also field those questions.
Yes.
Okay, other questions? Wait, I'm just going to see if any of your colleagues have any first. So anybody else? Okay.
Just to understand the magnitude of what you've been doing from day one and to get to the end of this thing, can you give us a ballpark figure on the cost that's been spent to get you through the remediation? In other words, the approval of this remediation and then the construction itself.
Yeah, right around more than that. To construct this system, just the construction cost, our vendor will probably charge us. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to comment on how much my client's spending on this, but I will say they're spending a considerable amount of money on this. Million. I don't think cost is.
No, because so normally you can do, there is the Public Records Act, and that's with state things, but we don't see any of their invoices. What you can see, though, in the draft feasibility study and remedial action plan, there are cost estimates as part of. So I think that question actually is answered in there that talks about, yeah, and if I recall, I think I saw in the feasibility study, it was about 10 million for the life of soil vapor, and if they were to do a groundwater extraction system as well as soil vapor extraction, then it's, even more. Yeah. Yeah. But
Okay.
again, that's you can find some of those ballpark estimates in that report.
Okay. I think we have one last question. So is the city of Newport Beach
Yeah, so
involved in all?
any ground disturbance that we create, we do pull permits from the city of Newport Beach. And I know Tracy works with local council members to
Yeah.
keep them informed of everything that's going on. But yeah, everything that we do is properly permitted, whether
And-
that's with the city or the county.
Yeah, and so I would say they're also on our mailing list. So when you get a fact sheet or a meeting announcement, they're also sent there as well. Yeah.
And I will add, so for the water board, we actually have an overseeing board, which is, oh gosh, it's 5 members that come from different entities. And a couple board meetings ago, they did ask a question. So at the October board meeting, I did give them a project update because there have been members within Newport that have talked to our board members about it. So I did give them a project update as well. So they are aware of what's going on. But like Tracy said, we are making sure the local council members, assembly members, every different city folks are being updated as appropriate and stuff.
Yeah, so if I can just add, the city reviews all of our documentation and our permitting. The only time they really come out, though, is when we remove a soil gas probe from the ground because they want to make sure that we properly backfill it, and they'll inspect our well monuments, what we put around the wells. But yeah, I'm happy to reach out to the city of Newport Beach. I mean, they are invited to these things, but yeah, they
I
choose not
just
to come.
want just add a little bit about permitting because we have been talking to the city, public works, zoning, and building department. We do need a permit from them after we finalize our drawing. We'll submit our drawings to them to review, and they're going to give a permit to us.
I'm sorry, my microphone cut out. It is about 3 till 7, and I think everybody must be a little cold at this point. We can all huddle under the heater there and answer any further questions you have. We'll remain afterwards. And then I will make sure I follow up with the 2 ladies back here. I know, Mike, you know them, because you wanted to talk specifically about your situation. So I'll make sure, yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And again, Mike and Jessica are available for questions.